and pass things over to Magnus to get us started. Thank you, Magnus.
Thanks, Emma. Welcome, everyone. I'm Magnus Lu. I'm the project manager here at PKP. So in today's webinar, we will be reviewing the highlights from the 3-year Craft OA initiative funded by Horizon Europe that started in January 2023 and just wrapped up at the end of last year in December. The focus was to build upon the PKP software suite with multilingual metadata and GDPR compliant features for Diamond Open Access. And the work featured in this webinar was led by Antti-Jussi Nygård at TSV alongside his colleagues and in partnership with our dev and testing team here at PKP. The collaboration and teamwork between the widely distributed teams and with varying levels of expertise make a various areas of expertise, pardon me, make a very good model, in my opinion, for future collaborative work. And just some housekeeping. So as usual, we have the QA channel there specifically for questions, and then the chat for any sort of back and forth chat. So please encourage you to participate, and we'll leave time for questions at the end. And with that, I will hand it over to Antti-Jussi.
Yes, thanks. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Hopefully you see it now. Say if you can't see it, or say if you can.
We can see it.
Okay, great. So yeah, like Magnus said, I'm Antti-Jussi Nygård from the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies. That's the TSV short for that organization name. And I work with actually two installations of PKP software with journal.fi, which is this, which is based on OJS. It's basically an installation with 170 Finnish scholarly journals that we are hosting. And then we have also an Open Monograph Press installation called edition.fi. At the moment, I haven't actually counted. I think we have something like 25 publishers or something like that. So a lot smaller than the OJS installation that we have, but still a fairly large OMP installation. I've been working with PKP for something like 10 years. I think I visited a PKP sprint for the first time in Montreal back in 2016, maybe, or something like that, and been in cooperation with them since. We, the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies, we have been participating in the development of the OJS and other PKP software during the past 10 years, basically. Not as any sort of a main partner, but have been trying to get involved also in the development of the software. And like Magnus said, I'm here today to talk about the Craft OA project and the things that we did with, especially with OJS, but basically I'm talking about OJS in the slides and probably say OJS a lot. But in practice, pretty much everything we did is also available for Open Monograph Press and also for Open Preprint Systems. So this isn't like application specific. All the features are mostly on the areas that apply to all the software. So Craft OA, like it was mentioned, was a 3-year European Union funded project. We had 23 organizations involved. I think all of them were European, so this was like a Europe-specific project. And like it was mentioned, the aim of the project was mainly technical. So we wanted to support open access diamond publishing and especially the technical side of things. I've listed here the aims of the project. These are like the official aims that we had, and highlighted the one that has to do with the presentation today. So one of the aims of the project was to provide technical improvements for journal platforms and journal software. That in practice meant OJS development. It was realized already during the planning of the project that the expertise that we had on the organizations involved applied especially to OJS. And we regarded OJS to be the most important application used by the Diamond Open Access publishers that we wanted to concentrate on. Basically, with the assistance of PKP and also hearing from our own experiences on the experiences of other organizations involved in the GraphOA project, we chose three main targets of development or development themes. As you can see, all of these are pretty much related to metadata in a way. Also the GDPR one is in regards related to metadata as well. And all of them are also in a way Europe specific. These are all really important things in Europe, but especially with the multilingualism topic and also with the metadata quality and extensibility topic, these of course apply worldwide to all users of OJS. But they stemmed from like European experiences in Diamond Open Access publishing and the needs that had come up in open access publishing in Europe. Today I'm going to concentrate on two of these. In the OJS development task, there were two main partners involved. Our organization, the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies, and then TIB from Germany. Somebody can write down in chat what TIB is short from, because I honestly can't remember. It's situated in Hanover, a technical university in Hanover, but I don't remember what TIB is short for. So TIB basically work on the data privacy and GDPR work, which I'm not going to touch today. I'm going to talk about the metadata quality and then about the multilingualism features. The way I'm going to work now is basically that I have a few slides where I basically represent like the development work we've done with various features, but mainly I'm going to show things on an OJS installation. First on 3.5 installation, especially with the multilingualism features, and then move on to show things in 3.6, which is the version that PKP is working on right now. So let's start. And we'll start with the multilingualism features because these are the features that are actually mainly already available in OJS 3.5 that was released last summer. There were other things besides these that we did, but these three are probably the most important and things that actually affect the way that editors work with the software. So three things: multilingual URL paths, wider support for metadata languages, especially support for small languages, and then a small but really significant thing. I think it was last week that I saw a question about this in the forum the last time. The ability to change the article metadata primary language during the editorial process that we can't do in earlier versions of OJS. So let's start with this one, the multilingual URL paths. And I have a 3.5 installation here. Basically, the challenges that we had before OJS 3.5 were that although there was a good support for having multilingual content in OJS, so you could have multilingual landing pages showing metadata in different languages. You could have, for example, the journal page, about the journal description page in different languages. It was really hard to expose these pages to readers and to web crawlers. So there were no URLs available that the web crawlers like Google could follow and index the pages. And also there was this practical thing that you couldn't actually provide a link leading directly into a specific language version of an article. So what we did is that we basically fixed that we changed OJS so that it's possible to have a URL part with a language code. If you are using an OJS only with one language, you will actually not notice this at all. So I have here an installation that only has English enabled. And as you can see, the URL structure here, it's the same as we have at the moment. But if I go to settings and apply the language settings and enable also French language, for example, for this installation, I can now see the URL for a language-specific page. If I change the language, you can see the French language code showing there. So for example, this page about the journal is now available in French, and you can also provide a link in French, and Google can follow that page in French if it needs to. And this, of course, applies to article landing pages. In this case, we don't have French article metadata, so it's not visible here. OJS is showing what it has, so basically the English metadata in this case. But if there would be, you would have a direct link leading to the French version of the article metadata and the page. This is also, if we check the source code, we are also instructing services like Google that there are alternative language versions of this specific page available, so that Google knows that we are talking about the same page, but with a different language. And it's also good to notice that although we have the language code here, the old URLs are not broken. So they basically lead you back to a language-specific page. And it's actually that when we, for example, at the moment register, for example, DOIs and send in the article URL to Crossref, we don't use a language-specific page. We use the default page without the language code. That will then redirect to whatever OJS finds to be the best candidate to show for the visiting user. So that's basically the URL codes. Like quite simple feature, a lot of work in the background, because everything was written to support these specific kinds of URLs without the language codes. So a lot of things change in the background, not that many things in the foreground, but that should allow more visibility for multilingual pages, for multilingual article pages and other pages in your journal. Then we move on to wider support and flexibility for metadata languages. So basically wider support for smaller languages, for regional languages, for example. And the challenges that we have had before 3.5 were basically that we pretty much lacked support for smaller languages. And this was due to the reason that the way that OJS was designed was that the languages that you had available for metadata were the same languages that you had available for the whole application. So if you had a translation for the user interface of OJS in your own language, you were fine, because you could just enable that language and use metadata for that language. But if you were in a situation where you wanted to publish an article with a smaller language, that was basically not possible. There were ways to work around it. Of course, you were able to create like a mock local file in the installation and basically say OJS that I have this translation of OJS available, and then allow you to enable that language and use metadata for that language. But that was, of course, a bit hacky and didn't work that well for most users. There were also like smaller things that were a bit difficult to do in OJS before 3.5. So when you enabled a language for example, in 3.4, you weren't able to just enable metadata for a specific language. So for example, in the Finnish case, it's fairly common to have a journal that publishes in Finnish, but they want to publish abstracts of the article in English. And if they wanted to enable the English abstract field in OJS, they at the same time basically said to users that we are allowing you to send submissions also in English. So you couldn't just enable the metadata fields for a specific language before. And the other thing was that if you had collected or published articles in some language before and decided that you are going to change the journal language, again, in the Finnish case, it was quite common that older journals used to publish scientific articles in German, especially in the 20s, in the 30s. That was like, in a way, the single scientific language that the Finnish scholarly journals used. It's quite common now that those journals, when they import content into OJS, they have these German articles, but they don't publish in German anymore. They basically publish only in English. They might publish something in Finnish, but not in German. And in old OJS, there was this problem that if you enabled or had articles, for example, in German, disabled the language in the settings, then you weren't able to edit the metadata of those articles anymore. The metadata pages basically disappeared from the administrative panel. So that was quite problematic. So this is basically what we started to fix. And if we look at OJS again, OJS 3.5, and check the language settings that we have now, you can see that what we've now done is that we have basically separated the concept of a website language and the concept of a metadata language. So if you recall, before 3.5, we had only this one selection of languages with 3 separate checkboxes that you could enable language in. But in this case, we are controlling the website languages, which is basically the available translations of OJS, which is the same amount of languages that we used to have. But now the submission languages or the metadata languages are a separate concept. So we are now able to choose from a list of, I think this is something like 700 languages that is provided by Weblate, which is the same software that we use to translate OJS into different languages. And the standard that it uses is a standard called PCP47, which is a combination of a 2-letter or a 3-letter language code together with like a regional description and then a script description. So for example, if you have a Cyrillic version of a specific language, you can create a PCP47 tag that shows you that this is the Cyrillic version of a language. So these are basically the languages that we have now available. So if I, for example, look for Sami languages, which is a related language to Finnish, we have these multiple languages available in Sami language. And I can, for example, enable Inari-Saame, which is a dialect of Sami language spoken in a specific area in northern Finland, and it's now available for metadata. And if I check the settings here, or the articles here, I can now see that I'm able to add metadata using that language. Then the other things that I mentioned, the few tricks or the few problems that we used to have with languages. I'm going to enable Finnish for this case. So if I, for example, enable now just the metadata selection for a specific language, and go to send a new submission, you can see that it's not available here as a submission language, but I can now basically add also Finnish metadata to an article. So I can collect, for example, the abstracts in a specific language, not allow to send in new submissions using that language. And if I add, for example, in this case, metadata in Finnish, just a minute, because I'm gonna forget which submission I chose, I'm gonna get this one. And then if I would have a situation where that language is no longer used, and it's basically disabled, I can still access this single submission for the Finnish metadata. So if I look at the other one, which doesn't have any Finnish metadata available, it's following then basically the settings that we have, and it's not showing the Finnish metadata tab anymore there, because in default, we are not accepting that. So yeah, those are basically the metadata languages changes that we applied. And then the last multilingual thing that I'm going to talk about is basically the ability to change the article language during the editorial process. So in versions prior to OJS 3.5, what we basically had was that when a user, for example, an author, sent in a new submission to the system, they had, of course, the ability to choose what is the primary language of the article. But when the submission was done and it arrived for the editor, there was actually no way of changing that language anymore. I know that at least in our case, we've done over the past few years a lot of editing of the database in these cases, and changed the metadata languages for specific articles just to clean up the metadata. Because if the author chose wrong, if there's multiple languages available for the OJS installation, and they are allowing articles in multiple languages, then there might be a lot of situations where they basically do the wrong decision in the beginning. But it's actually quite hard to spot that as an editor prior to 3.5, because the primary language isn't like clearly visible in the user interface. There's no way to change it. So we usually spot that in situations where the metadata has already been published and it's sent to other services. And then we get feedback from some service that there's this article that's saying that it's in English, but it's actually all the metadata is available only in Finnish. And then we have to fix things in the database and send the article metadata again. But what we did is that we basically fixed this. I have to do an older version for this. So now we have the main language, the primary language that was chosen by the author, clearly visible in the user interface here. And we have the ability to basically change that language during the process. The alternatives that you can change the language into are, of course, the activated metadata languages. And if you do that, you need to basically give the required metadata for that article. In this case, it doesn't actually ask me to fill in the abstract, so it's probably sent into a somewhere where the abstract isn't required. But if I put French title here, I can't write French title in French, but if I put it here, I basically now switched the article to a French spoken article, and now you can see that the main metadata is now the French metadata here. The English metadata, of course, is still available in the other tab. Okay, so those are basically the main things that we did with multilingualism. I think that the most influential is the extension of available languages, and especially the new concept of dividing the website languages and the metadata languages, which gives us a lot of wiggle room in its software, where we don't have to design things based on what's available in the UI and what's available in metadata. The problem still is in that regard, I think, is that although OJS now supports a really wide selection of metadata languages, the services where we send the metadata are not that good in that regard. But I think that PKP and OJS in this way can work as an example for these other services, that also those services could start supporting a wide selection of languages based on the BCP 47 standard, which is a quite old standard, so it would be a good standard to follow. I actually heard just a couple of weeks ago that, for example, Crossref is now supporting also three-letter language codes in their metadata. They used to only support two-letter language codes, which was quite limited amount of languages, but the three-letter support is already a really good step forward. Okay, so let's move on to the metadata extensibility features that we've been developing. And here we actually have two cases. We have the first case, the external controlled vocabularies case, that's already released in 3.5. The three other ones are things that are going to come in OJS 3.6. I actually don't know the official release date for that, but I would imagine it's sometime late this year. Magnus probably knows the exact date, or at least a bit better than I do. But these are features that are ready. They are in the development version of OJS, but they are not released yet, so they are not available as an official release. So let's start with the external controlled vocabularies work that we've done. Basically, controlled vocabularies is something that's already supported in OJS in older versions as well. So the way that OJS supports this concept is that there are these few metadata fields. I've listed a few here. So basically keywords, discipline, coverage. I think the subject was one of them. I think there was a fifth one as well, but I can't remember it right now. But in any case, they work in a way that based on the earlier user input. So when users, authors or editors add, for example, keywords to the system will remember those old entries or the old words that were put into the database. And when a new user or a new author comes in, they will basically see the suggestions based on that pool of collected data. The problem that we've had with this approach is that it's really hard to limit the use of vocabularies to a specific vocabulary if a journal wants to use one. So it also, the whole concept basically relies on the idea that whoever adds, for example, the keywords to the system, they know that this is an official keyword that they need to know. So they need to check it somewhere, and it's all basically manual work. Other thing is a bit more technical that has been problematic in OJS is that OJS for things like keywords, OJS had the ability to only store the actual word that was added to the system. So there was no support for storing. If you got the words from a controlled vocabulary, you also usually have identifiers for the words, for example, URIs or something similar. And there was no way of storing also the identifier for the word to distinguish that it comes from a specific vocabulary or is a specific word in a situation where there might be similar words with different meaning. So what we did for OJS 3.5 is that we basically created or edited the core of OJS to have a good support for integrating basically external vocabularies using really simple plugins. And the other thing that we did is that we changed the database structure to also allow storing the identifiers that come with the controlled vocabularies, the external controlled vocabularies. I'm just going to showcase you what I mean in practice. So if I go to a single submission here and check the metadata, we have these like existing entries here, and these all come from earlier input from OJS users. And it's also like it's also actually a bit difficult because there might be also words that are not yet edited or something that needs to be removed by the editor and so forth, but you still see them in the suggestions as the words. So what we basically did is that we created a way of creating really simple plugins. I have a few example plugins here. Okay, so GitHub is probably not working with me right now. Okay, no. Yeah, okay, so this is one of the plugins. This is a plugin that we created as an example that other developers could use. So at the moment it uses a Finnish, okay, sorry about this. Okay, GitHub isn't like cooperating right now, so let's not rely on GitHub. So basically, the example plugin that I had there is a really simple plugin that connects OJS through a REST API to a source of vocabulary suggestions. And when somebody starts to write something, you get the suggestions through the API. It doesn't have to be an API, so this is actually up to the plugin how it wants to work. If it's a smaller vocabulary, for example, in the case of the Frascati plugin that Alex Meher has been working on, it can also be a local file. So if it's a small classification, like in this case, it can lie in an XML file, and the plugin can read the suggestions from the XML file. So it depends on the source that you might have. So if I go to the settings and enable the plugin here, and now go back to editing the metadata in an existing submission, you can see here now that I started to write. It will fetch the suggestions from the vocabulary, from the external vocabulary using the API. And also, when I save that data, if I go to the just a second, go to the database side of things, I can actually see here that for all the older words, only data that's available here is basically the word itself, the name field that's been filled in. For the last two entries that I filled in there, the plugin and OJS core are cooperating and also storing the identifier. So this is data that can be used if you have, for example, a national vocabulary, for example, that you need to use in your installation. You can create this simple plugin that will attach itself to the API that might be available for that vocabulary. And if you need to, for example, like in our case, in the Finnish case, need to export your article metadata to a national library collection, for example, you can use the keywords together with the identifiers for more richer metadata than you used to. So yeah, so that's basically the external controlled vocabulary support. I was hoping to show you a bit of the code, but I'm not going to try GitHub now. There's probably some technical problem with GitHub at the moment. But you can check the link. I can maybe provide the link from somewhere after the presentation and check the code of the plugin if you're interested in developing something of your own that works the similar way. Okay, so let's move on to current development things. I have 3 things remaining. And first of them is enhanced contributor metadata. There are, of course, other things that we could fix in contributor metadata as well, but I've seen for a long time, especially these 2 things that being problematic with contributor metadata. So firstly, in OJS up until now, there's been no support for adding groups or organizations as authors or as contributors in the article metadata. So if you had to add like an organization as an author, you basically added a person named an organization, which is really bad in regards of the metadata itself when it's exported in other places. The other thing that was problematic in OJS was that although in theory, OJS had this support for author roles or contributor roles built in, they were not actually working in a machine-readable way. So OJS actually doesn't do any distinction between if you select an author role or a translator role for a contributor. OJS doesn't have the ability to distinguish between the 2 roles. The code sees them the same way practically. So if I demo this in practice, I'm just going to open this one, I think. Yeah, so if I demo this in practice and go to the contributor metadata of an existing article and want to add an organization, the usual way that I see people working is doing something like this. So basically creating a person named editorial board or something similar. And also, the same way, if I want to, for example, add a translator for this specific article and choose the contributor role translator here, it does look quite okay. Also, like the editorial board, visually, it looks quite okay. But in practice, if I look for example, the OIA metadata of the article. So go here and check what's basically revealed in the metadata. I can see, for example, an author called board editorial, and that's going to end up in different places, like, for example, Crossref metadata, in that way that it's going to say that there's a person named board editorial there. And also, what's good to spot here is that although I've now selected, and it does visually display that this is a translator called Antti-Jussi Nygård here, the citation here actually doesn't know who's the author and who's the translator of this specific work. And that's the reason is that there's no machine readable roles. It can't do it. And actually at the moment in OJS, the way that you work around this is that you have to go to the plugin settings of the citation style language plugin. And you have this selection here where you say that the author role is the author and the translator role is the translator, which is like sounds probably quite weird if you don't understand what's going on technically in the background. But once you've basically done that, it changes the things, and you can now actually see that I've been marked here as the translator, and here's the order of that paper. But what we basically did in OJS 3.6 is that we introduced basically core support for both of these concepts. So I've moved on now to an OJS 3.6 installation. And I must warn you that this is like development branch, so there might be things that don't work at the moment. But if I go to the same submission here and check the contributor metadata here, and add a contributor, I now have this selection in the beginning where I first choose what type of a contributor I am going to add. These three selections actually come from Crossref. So Crossref has support for this. Some places only have support for person or organization, so they don't have support for anonymous contributors, but we wanted to add that as well because it was supported at least by Crossref. It's a bit different concept to have an anonymous contributor. But depending on which I choose, different fields are required. So if I go for an organization or group, then I need to put in the organization name and then the other metadata basically here. I also have the ability to add a role identifier for the organization if needed, and then choose the role that it has. And that's now like proper machine readable organizational order that we can take into account when we export metadata into different places. Also, if I add now a translator called Antti-Jussi Nygård to this specific article and check the page, you can see that this starts to work right away. So I don't have to, in 3.6, I don't have to go, for example, to the citation style plugin settings to say that which one of the roles is an order, which one is a translator. It recognizes those automatically because they are machine readable roles. And what's in the background is that in old OJS, we used to have these users and roles selection here. So basically, we had these roles that were used both for user permissions and for contributor roles. But in the new version of OJS in 3.6, we have this completely separate contributor role taxonomy. We have these two default roles that we used to have in OJS before, but you have the ability to add new roles and to choose the identifier for that role. And once you have this, you also have the ability to basically control, for example, in the article landing page, the different kinds of roles differently. So if you want to display, for example, things like illustrators in the article metadata, but you don't want to export that illustrator contributor metadata to Crossref to say that it's an author, you can just create a new role called illustrator and use that role in the metadata. So that's quite flexible and opens up a lot of new things. We are still implementing, like when we export metadata to other places, we are still implementing that these new roles will be all taken into account, if possible, if allowed by the service itself. But at minimum, we can now make sure that all the contributor metadata, if a service is only allowing authors to be regarded in the metadata, we can make sure that only authors are being sent in the article metadata. And then another related thing is support for credit roles, which is a bit similar to contributor roles, but still different. And you might ask that why do we need a separate support for these credit roles and separate support for contributor roles? And the answer is simply that they surfaced a really different purpose. Like the contributor roles that I just spoke about have a really like functional role in OJS. So it helps us to control specific contributors in a specific way in the code. For example, to distinguish between authors and translators. The credit roles are meant for different purpose. They are meant for giving a more finely defined description of what a single person has done in an article. So if you have an author of an article, but they've also done work with the data sets or things like that, you can basically describe that using the credit roles. And the way it's supported now is that, well, it used to be supported actually with a plugin in OJS, but with 3.6, it's going to be part of the core support. So if I go to edit this author in this specific article, I now have this credit roles selection here, and I can basically add as many credit roles as I want to this specific order. So if they've done, for example, writing and data curation, I can choose those roles. And we also implemented this degree concept that credit roles has. At the moment, it's not officially part of the taxonomy. It's a suggestion made by Credit, but we wanted to support that. So it's basically a description that what if they've done writing, what was their role in doing the writing, were they the lead writer or supporting writer or whatever. But adding these roles also brings them visible in the article metadata page. And of course, when this data is exported, if the service supports this data, it's going to be taken into regard. For example, ORCID supports credit roles. I think that Crossref as well is introducing support for credit roles. So there's been a big uptake of credit roles, and that's the reason that PKP wanted to have that in the core of OJS. Okay, so I'm going to move to the last one, and I'm sorry I'm a bit late from schedule. It was a bit difficult to estimate how much time it takes to go through all these features. The last thing is data citations support in OJS. So what we have in OJS at the moment, I think it's at least up from 3.4, could be in 3.3 already, I don't recall in detail. What we have is this free-form data availability statement field that you can enable in the metadata settings. So basically an ability to give a free-form text description of what kind of data has been used in the article and in what way. It's a good as a visual thing to be presented on the article landing page, but it's something that is not big of a use when you export the article metadata. So what we've introduced for OJS 3.6 is the ability to add structured data citations to article metadata. We still have also the data availability statement there. So if you only want to use that or you want to use both, then that's possible as well. But you can now basically add also the structured citations. So if I go to my test journal, I'm just going to check if I have that enabled. Oh, let's go to settings right away to check that. So if I go to the metadata settings of a specific journal, I have this data availability statement available, which is already in the older version of OJS, but I now also have this data citation selection here available that I can enable. And then when I go to edit article metadata, I have this data tab now available here. It shows both the data availability statement that you can add a free-form text to, but it also shows the data citations selection here. You can basically create new data citations. These are like the default fields that are usually mentioned in for example, in description of chats or data site requires these fields in a structured data citation. So these are the fields that we have chosen. So title, identifier type, the identifier itself, relationship type, which is a bit hard to describe. It's basically what's the relation of the data and the article, and then repository year and the creators of the data of the data set. So if we check the filled-in fields here, you can see what it looks like. And on the landing page at the moment, and this is probably not the final implementation, what it's going to look like in the landing page of the default theme of OJS. It's just something that's there at the moment. It's going to show the data citations here in the bottom. And of course, it's data that's available for exports when you export article metadata. Okay, so that's basically the last feature that I'm going to represent. And the last feature that we've developed. Like I said, there's been other smaller things, but these are basically the main things that we've had. Thanks, and sorry for taking too much time.
But we have enough time for, there's two questions here in the chat, both related to multilingual metadata.
Yeah.
Okay, the first one is, can you show how it's exposed on the reader side and indexing tools?
So which feature?
The translations into the small language metadata.
Okay. You mean that how is the article language exposed, like the if you have an article published in a small language?
I believe so, but Alexander, if you want to clarify if there are any clarifying points. I believe that's the question.
Yeah. So basically how it works is that I'm not. It's going to take quite a lot of time to add content and edit it. But basically how it works is that if you publish an article with a smaller language, for example, it might be a common situation that you have a journal which has the user interface available in, for example, English or in Finnish, and they are publishing also content, for example, in the Sami language. When you add a Sami language article, it's going to be displayed with all the Sami metadata, just like you would have it in the English metadata. If you have like multilingual content, if you have the same article in multiple languages, then it becomes a bit trickier because it would require you to be able to show the different languages of that specific content. And it basically comes closer to a situation where you might want to consider that maybe you also need the user interface for that language.
And the second part of that question, it relates to how that information is exposed to indexing tools.
Basically, if a place like, for example, Crossref supports the article metadata on that specific language, then it's sent with those metadata tags to that service.
Okay, so the second question, I'll go back to the reader UI question, but the second question related to multilingual metadata, are there any thoughts of tackling multilingual references in the future?
Yeah, yeah. That was actually something that we looked at in the very beginning. That how would we work on that? It's an existing thing so there's an existing GitHub issue in PKP GitHub on multilingual references. The problem that we bumped into was that the way that the references database was built during that time made it really difficult to implement a multilingual approach. And there was also knowledge back then that PKP was redesigning the whole references work suite. So basically in 3.6, they've now released a support for structured citations. So we did want to work also on those multilingual references, but realized that it's going to get messy if we try to implement that multilingual support at the same time as PKP is working on implementing the structured citation support. That's also something that's going to be available in 3.6, not connected to Craftaway development at all, but that's also a feature that's available in 3.6.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, in your Antti-Jussi, in your original demo, when you were adding languages, are you able to show what that looks like in the reader side, or did you just add the functionality for the ability to add the language? You didn't actually add the copy. Because the only reason I ask is because there's a question here to see what it looks like on the reader interface.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the problem with the default theme is that it isn't designed to work in a way where you are exposing a language it will expose the language if you have published that only with, for example, the Sami metadata. So if the main primary language of an article is Sami language, and then you publish that article, it's going to show the metadata in Sami language. But if you choose to add also metadata in English, for example, so you have, for example, both the English title and abstract and the Sami title and abstract for an article, the default theme that we have in OJS right now isn't designed to basically expose both of those things. We actually worked also on the concept of displaying multilingual metadata at the same time on the article landing page, but there were some UI things that we didn't have time to finish, but hope to work on during this year that we get that released, and that would be then available in the default theme. So if you want to have a situation where you want to have both English metadata and Sami metadata, for example, but you don't have the user interface available for the Sami metadata, then you need to implement something in your own team at the moment. So we've worked on mainly on with a metadata first approach. We wanted to fix the way that we store metadata and what is available in like the database side and the database design of OJS and the approaches that we have in OJS to support small languages. I think like the question, how do we want to display multilingual metadata, that's a bit different. And like I know that there's some people that are big fans of the current way that OJS works, that it basically changes the metadata based on when you change the UI language. But maybe there could be some other approaches to basically exposing the metadata as well. So to answer your question, no, I can't show you how it looks like. I could show you if I would take a few minutes to publish an article just using the Sami language. Then it would basically show the Sami language metadata regardless of what you have selected in the UI language. But if I add to an existing article Sami metadata and then try to reveal that on the landing page at the moment, with the default theme that we have in OJS, that's not possible at the moment.
Okay, and I'm sorry, we're a little bit over, but Antti-Jussi, if you could spend maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm not in a rush, so.
This final question is, are there future plans for Craftaway after 3.6?
After 3.6? For Craftaway, you mean?
Yes.
So Craftaway has ended. so there's no additional plans in regards to Craftaway. I know that there are a few projects that are just starting or have started already that are in a way related to CraftAway, but they are not approaching or they don't have the same focus as CraftAway project had. So CraftAway was really technical, and we have had this opportunity to actually aim resources to actual OJS development. The focus of the new projects at least I believe so. I'm not part of those projects, so I don't know in detail, but my belief is that the focus is a bit different. We do plan, like my organization, we do plan to continue working on, especially on multilingualism related issues, and also issues related to problems that you might have with larger installations of OJS with multiple journals, I mean. Because those are usually a bit different problems that you might have with single journal installations out there. But yeah, with CraftAway, no, but I know both DSV, also TIB, who was part of this development work, they are also definitely planning to continue working on it.
Okay, we are a little bit over, so thank you for attending, and Antti-Jussi, thank you very much. So we'll post we'll make the video available, and that'll also give you an opportunity to, if you have any follow-ups, there'll be a way to ask questions there. And Emma posted a link to the forum where you can ask any questions. And we have a development webinar on February 23rd, and Emma also posted the link there for the invitation. So please grab that before we close the Zoom meeting. All right, thank you very much, everybody.